Welcome back to the channel, everybody. If you've been with us for a while now, we do appreciate you coming back and watching this video, and we do appreciate all the support you guys have given us. Thank you for that. But
Thank
we
you.
usually like to do videos that when we have these discussions that kind of contrast one another. So if you've seen our previous video of games to movies, that was a fun one to do, and we just kind of randomly came up with that topic. Like, hey, we should talk about this. And it was really fun to do, to edit. I love that one. We wanted to flip it around this time and do this video of what happens when they make games from movies. So, Mantis, I know we were just talking before we got on camera. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, so there. I think it kind of gets a bad rap because, quite frankly, it's either feast or famine in this category, and maybe that's kind of how it was with when we went from games to movies. Either they were good or they were really bad, right? Um, you know, growing up in the 90s, there it was kind of the end of the 80s and 90s in general were kind of this boom of video gaming, right? Home console gaming, I should say. It was kind of coming to the end of the Atari, and you had Nintendo, the NES, the Super NES. This is when Sony kind of got into the game with when it was going up against the N64, and you had the PlayStation come in there and Sega was still in there. I mean, it was like this big boom of video game consoles and companies making all this stuff. So it made sense for them to kind of do what they do with the whole reason for movie making is merchandising, right? It's all merchandising. It's all toys and video games, right? For some reason, video games didn't necessarily adapt the way that toys always had an appeal, I think, to moviegoers. Uh, you know, um, yeah. So I guess to kind of to answer your question, it always hasn't been the best. There are diamonds in the rough, and when I say diamonds in the rough, it kind of leads me to my first game that I do. One of the very first games I remember playing, and I want to say it was on the Super Nintendo, and it don't hate me for this, but Aladdin, the Aladdin game for SNES as a platformer was a fun game, and it was taken from crazily from an animated game from an animated movie. So it kind of it pulled well, right? Like it literally looks like the same character you see on the movie. The characters are the same, and it's a platform. It's a fun game. So you know, I I would say for my first foray into it, that's the game that I would kind of lead off with. Um, yeah,
See, the thing is, I can give you a pass on Aladdin, right? Because also, one, there weren't a lot of video games coming from movies at that time, as well as, again, you're still getting into this video game world. There's not a whole lot out there. Like, around those times, you had like Super Mario and things like that, but you didn't have the kind of like the Skyrims, the Oblivions, the Starfields, the games we have nowadays, where your movie games just don't stack up, right? And
yeah.
for me, I guess where it crushes my soul was, at the time when the original Iron Man and Iron Man 2 and Thor came out, for those of you who sadly remember that time, they put out video games of each of those. Well, they put out an Iron Man game. They did a sequel to it when Iron Man 2 came out. They put out a Thor game, right? And at the time, I was dating this girl, God love her. She was doing well. Like, she knew I loved video games, right? So she thought, and she knew I loved superheroes. So she thought she was doing well by, instead of getting me Oblivion, she got me Iron Man, right? Because she's like, oh, he loves games and he loves superheroes.
Yeah,
This is
totally forgivable. Totally
yeah,
forgivable.
it's not on her. And the reason I played the game is because she bought them for me, right? And I played it, and I beat the game and played it to the end, which they're about 4 hours long. And the playability, the replay factor, not on her. I'm not blaming her for anything. She did what she thought she was doing this, and I really appreciate the gesture of her doing that. Right, it meant a lot. And I never got rid of those games just because she gave them to me. But you've got the Thor game was god awful terrible. I mean, absolute garbage. And the thing was, it came
Yeah.
out at like full price, right? So like Skyrim
Yeah.
and the Thor game were the same price, and instead of getting like Skyrim, I got Thor. And
Yeah.
it's one of those that like you play this game and you're like, okay, you tried to make it from. And the thing is, because they put out like Thor, the game was based off the first movie for the most part, right? Well,
Mhm.
again, the movie didn't have a whole like. There's not a lot of story. There's not a lot of lore. There's not a lot of explanation. So your
I
game is very thin.
I almost want to say the superhero movie to video game genre is a thing in itself. Because most of them are terrible. Like specifically superhero games made from movies. Like I just don't know like because it's not like Iron Man the character is the video game, right? Like it was Iron Man from the movie Iron Man,
Yeah,
right?
it followed the same. Like you're fighting at the end. The main
Yeah.
bad guy is this. Now they had a lot of side missions and things that went outside the scope of the movie. Because you have to
Mhm.
have your repeatable fights that
Sure.
you just run into
Sure.
and level up because you had to upgrade your suit and things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Now, where I say it differs, and the problem is it kind of followed the movie was the original Spider-Man game that came out for I think it's like PlayStation 2, based off the
Mhm.
first movie, kind of loosely based off of. Now they did kind of like
Sure.
the Superman NES game, if you ever remember the Superman Nintendo 64 game, where to limit his ability there was this kryptonite fog and you couldn't go past these certain bounds. Well, the original
Right.
Spider-Man game you couldn't go to the
There
ground.
was
There was clouds,
right.
and if you fell, you just died. Well, when the Spider-Man 2 game, that's still heralded as one of the best,
It is.
like
Yeah.
superhero games out there. But it was still loosely based off of the second movie, kind like I said, loosely, not all the way,
Yeah.
but it was loosely based off of, and just like the new Spider-Man game, the remastered and all of that. It's not based off of the movies, but there's a lot of elements of them in there, and they're great. But actual
Oh, well,
superhero to what
I was just gonna say, yeah, the Spider-Man games are the pinnacle of like
superhero games too.
superhero games. It is just it's far and above any other type of superhero game that's ever been made. Like it just they just are. The Spider-Man games lean themselves to the open world. There's collectibles that you can get. Like the game just is you can play
What,
it forever, right? And it looks great.
what
So
about Arkham Asylum?
Arkham. Okay, well, yeah. So, and I don't know if there's a storyline. I mean, I don't know if there's a movie based off this. Again, we're kind of going comic book to movie to video game, or just comic book to video game here with Batman, right? Like it's a weird thing because Arkham Asylum, I think, is a newer game that I don't think was specifically based off any movie
It was, yeah,
particularly,
was not.
but there is a Batman game that came out that is an older game. You know, it is an older game, but it is pretty good. I remember playing. I think it was. I didn't play it that long, but I know it got great reviews. It was on the first Nintendo system, and I can't. I want to let me look it up real fast. Hold on.
Well,
Um,
while he's looking that up, I'll tell you another one that was kind of interesting because we both love the movie, but there's a Stargate game, like an old Stargate game, like Super Nintendo level Stargate game, that is for its time because I mean it's a side scroller. Uh, I liked it, right? We're big fans of the movie and the TV shows and such, and it was again
mhm.
it was based off of the movie, right? And I thought it did well, and it didn't have the graphics, obviously, because it's a really old. You got to imagine the original Stargate came out what 94, 90, 95, I think, and then the show aired in 97 because there's like a couple of year. So it's kind of like
Mhm.
but it was fun. But what did you find out about Batman?
Yeah, yeah. So Sunsoft made Batman based off of the game is strictly based off of the Tim Burton film, right? It's a platformer, and I remember it now because I was looking at some pictures of the gameplay, and I'm like, "Yep, that's it." I mean, it's a platformer. You get batarangs, you can wall jump, you can. I mean, it's kind of like in like the Mega Man type
Yeah, that's
avenue. Um, it was so good. It's so fun. It's one of those games that you felt like Batman. You felt like Batman when you played that game back in the day. Like, it was based off, again, the 1989 the Tim Burton film, right? So it couldn't have been released too far after that. I want to say probably in the 90s, the early 90s, or maybe it was like 1990 was when that game came out on the NES. It was awesome. I remember playing that. It was good.
Now, see, to that, one of my all-time favorite movies outside of superheroes is True Lies with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Jamie Lee Curtis in there. There's a Super Nintendo game of True Lies.
Really? I
Yes.
never played that.
It's actually fun. Like, it is actually fun, and it goes like and that's kind of the cool thing is, like, a lot of times when you have these superhero or these games coming from movies, like, they have the levels are like action points in the show in the movie,
right?
It follows with that, but it's really, really fun. Like, just being able to play as Arnold, it's one of those little shooter kind of games, but you're that overhead view of it, as so like you're playing up ahead, and it's still a kind of a 2D, but they make it look 3D kind of an environment and all that. But I love that game, as if we're talking about actually the success of video games coming from movies.
Yeah, and I'm gonna kind of go on the dark side. I say the dark side. It's really like the lower tier thing. Like, one of the, quite frankly, I guess maybe one of the worst video games from a movie, E.T.
Oh God. Oh, wait, are you talking about the old ET one?
1982.
Yes.
The old, like, his neck would stretch and there's like, you'd fall in these holes, and like, I never played it. I just know I'm sure people that maybe are watching this know the angry, what is it? The Angry Video Game Nerd or whatever did a specific YouTube video back when YouTube first started, but he did a show on this specifically about this game, and there's rumored to be like a pile of them somewhere in Texas or Arizona that they, like, the company literally just threw in a fucking hole and buried them because they're fucking trash, right? Yeah.
So now, and I'll cut it in here, guys, because again, we're doing this kind of on the fly, so it's like,
True. Polygon wrote that the excavation appears to confirm the story that Atari dumped thousands of unsold ET cartridges at the site more than 30 years ago.
Like, again, we don't have anything scripted, so like, as they're coming in our heads and we're thinking about it, we know, like, the ET game. I remember watching, there's like a documentary kind of special thing or whatever that I think the way he does it anyways, where he talks about it. It's actually a pretty valuable game if you found it, or if you have a copy, but it is a kind of side scroller. I mean, you can go up, down, wherever, but the levels look, I mean, he's just a little blob, right? And like when he says fall into a hole, there's just like this. There's just blank space, and if you walk over, he just falls into it. And then, I mean, it's god awful terrible. But also, you got to remember, like, there were games like that when we were growing up that you had.
This was on the Atari.
Yeah, you had Centipede and Dig Dug. I mean, fuck, we had Pong. Just two bars and a ball, like, going out there, and we found that fun.
And, kind of to what I was talking about, the burial. So, this is from Wikipedia, which I know this particular part, I don't trust many things from Wikipedia, but I know this is right. It's saying September 1983, the paper Armadillo Daily News from New Mexico reported a series of articles that between 10 and 20 semi-truck trailer loads of Atari boxes, cartridges, and systems from a storehouse in El Paso, Texas, were crushed and buried at a landfill within the city, which is covered with concrete. On May 28, 2013, they improved the Fuel Industries of Entertainment Company from Ottawa, I guess they're from Canada or whatever, 6 months landfill access to create a documentary about the legend and to excavate the burial site. So, of course, they excavated these things, and there were tons of these cartridges, these Atari cartridges from these games in there. And surprisingly, a lot of them were from E.T., right? This game was just so terrible, right? Even back in the day. Again, it's not asking much. The graphics back in the day weren't good. Like you said, it was Pong. Like, people were entertained from two things going like this and a ball hitting another one. All right, we're not talking about Call of Duty where they're calling airstrikes. You can fucking like snipe those, all this stuff. Like no, it's like literally two things going like this, and you move them, and you have to hit the ball. It's not complicated. People were entertained by this.
I love how that article words that though. Excavate the burial site like it's some Indian burial ground or it's some mass grave.
It is. It's cursed. It's cursed.
They don't shit games that they just couldn't sell.
It's so bad. Like, I mean, and that's the one that sticks out of my mind is the worst game that has been created from a movie, right? I kind of want to get back on the positive side because one of the most fun games that I ever played as a kid, and I still play these occasionally off and on, for Super Nintendo. And Super Nintendo is kind of my wheelhouse. That's when I kind of got really into video games. But all of the Super Star Wars games, I'm a big Star Wars fan, but Super Star Wars A New Hope, Super Star Wars Empire Strikes Back, Super Star Wars Return of the Jedi, all of those games are fantastic games. It was a platformer, but then you were in space and you were in your X-Wing and you were right in, in Return of the Jedi, you were on the bike and you were kind of dodging things. Like it was good. Those games were great as a port from a movie to a video game.
All right, now this is going to be an interesting one here. I'm curious to see because since you mentioned Star Wars, it made me think of one here. This is going to go either one of two ways. It's on PlayStation 1. When Episode 1, I think it's PlayStation 1 or 2. When Episode 1, The Phantom Menace came out, and it's from the movie because the whole scene, everything, and which you could use the pod racers are from the movie, and you had to fight Soboba, and you're trying to get in there. Is the pod racing, Star Wars pod racing? Okay,
N64, right?
What?
That's from N64.
Is it N64? Sure. I thought it was PlayStation.
No, I'm almost 100% positive it's from N64. Because I played the shit out of that game, and I loved pod racing. Like I fucking loved that game. I played that game religiously. And maybe you'll make a liar out of me. I could be a liar, but I'm almost positive it was hardcore N64.
I'm looking up here because I could swear. Oh, wait, they did an HD release on the Switch and the PlayStation 4. No, it was released in 2002 for the PlayStation 2. I knew I was right.
Okay.
But I loved that game. Like, I hated Episode 1. We've talked about Star Wars before.
Yeah.
Like, the little kid, it's working! It's working!
It's working! It's working!
It's an iconically bad scene, but everybody knows that, and you always reference it when you need to say something. At work, if something's going wrong and it starts working, you always reference that, right? But the pod racing game was fun as hell. I love that game.
It
was.
You could
the video game from the movie surpasses the movie.
Yes. Yeah, and it was the niche thing. Like racing games are very niche. They are, but that game, it brought in the Star Wars universe into a racing game that you could mod your pod racer, you could buy new ones, you could change the vents on, you could change the drives and make it faster or slower, give it more boost. Like there were so many options, and it was even fun single player. Like it was.
I think what really kind of helped me tie it in is all of the sound effects from the movie when the pod racers are going are in the game. Like identical. When his pod starts up and they're going around the corners, so it made it like kind of immersive, right? You're like, oh fuck, I'm in there. And now, granted, the original PlayStation 2 version, the graphics when it came out, when we were playing it, they were amazing, right? You play it now and you'd be like, holy shit, which, like I just said, the Switch and PS4 have it remastered, which I've got my Switch right here. I need to check that out. So, like, they'll be improved, and hopefully it looks a lot better. But when we played it back in the day, that was the top-of-the-line graphics. That game I love that game.
Yeah, it was a fun game. And again, you know me, like, I'm not really racing or cars, like, don't really interest me that much.
Well,
but
I caught what you said when I left, when we did the one video, and you talked about the cars.
I
was editing that video. I caught what you said.
I was hoping you would catch that.
Yeah, I got to see that. You guys will find out about that video Actually, that's our movies to game or games to movies. We were talking about Need for Speed and all of that. So the video that this one is the opposite to. Yeah, I caught what you said when I left the room.
Well, just so you guys know, the Cars is just a little bit overblown. I don't know why he likes all the car movies and stuff. I mean, it's kind of cool, but like, it's for me, it's just like, who cares? Cars here, cars there. It's cars you never get. Oh, you're back. Okay. The Star Wars, there's so many games that have been made off the Star Wars franchise. X-Wing versus TIE Fighter. Even if you get into the newer games with KOTOR, we can't leave out KOTOR. And I know it's not directly brought from a specific Star Wars movie, but it is kind of the same universe type of thing. Maybe one of the greatest RPG like Star Wars games, and I don't even say it might be just one of a good RPG game ever created. It's so good.
So, guys, forgive us. Sometimes we try to do our best when we say. So when he says KOTOR, he's saying Knights of the Old Republic. Okay.
Sorry. Yeah,
it happens. Like we're as being gamers and comic.
I feel like if you're watching this, you know what that is.
You should, but for those of you who don't, because it was over, right? And obviously with like Fallen Order and some of these new Star Wars games out, who the fuck wants to go back and play Knights of the Old Republic? Anybody who loves Star Wars is who, right? You should, because they are amazing. Yes. I've had it on. I had it on my iPad. I've had it on the Switch. I've had it on so many different platforms and stuff because it is fun. HK47 and there, I love him.
Expletive. Damn it, Master. I am an assassination droid, not a dictionary.
But it is one that, yes, it's not directly tied from the movies, but it would be when we did our last one about games to movies. It is the one where I would say.
That would be yes.
I want, if we're talking about the Star Wars realm, make that a movie. We can, when we do games to movies part 2, I want that to be included in there, right? Like, we just created a Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic movie. Like we
it has
explored that lore.
Yeah, it's not just the gameplay of that. It like because it is an RPG, right? Like you do have a character and you control them, you skill points and all this stuff. Like that's great. But the really the shining, gem of that game is the storytelling. It is really good writing. You feel like you're in the game. Again, there's a twist at the end of that game that first time I played it, I was like, holy, I was like, thrown back. We're not gonna ruin it here, but if you really need to play that game all the way through, because the payoff is so worth it.
That was one of those "what is my life" kind of moments. Like everything's a
lie. Yeah,
like I just
So exactly.
And that's the thing. When a game can elicit that kind of emotion from you, like it's a good game, right? And that's the problem with with this topic when we say movies to games. The movie ends up eliciting that emotion, but the game falls flat.
Sure.
A lot of times. Now, another one, if you've watched our favorite superheroes video where we talked about our favorite movie and TV show of superheroes, my favorite movie was Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Well, they made a game of that Power Rangers movie. I love that game. Love it.
It's great. The game's great. It reminds me of Ninja Turtles.
Yes.
Like it straight up reminds me of Ninja Turtles.
Now, the Ninja Turtles games... the best ones in actually, I'm trying to think. I don't think there's one directly based off the movies, but the Ninja Turtles games are great. Those older ones, kind of side scroller. The Mighty Morphin Power Rangers was the same way. They're great. Love them. Absolutely.
Yeah. Turtles in Time. If you get you can get Shredder's Revenge, like the newer release. That's a fantastic game. It's kind of a meld of both, I think.
Turtles in Time is classic, man.
It's a great game, and this kind of reminds me of I don't know why this reminded me of this, but there's a particular game that we're leaving out that I know we both
haven't got to it yet.
Well, yeah, I mean,
I don't know what you're gonna say yet, but I'm still.
It's a Nintendo 64 game that I know. I would assume most people.
Oh, I know where you're going. As soon as you said I know where you're going with this, and he is correct.
That I know most people that are watching this have hopefully played this game, and maybe not, because it's a game that has been forgotten in time. I feel like There's so many memes of this game.
This game is the GOAT. Okay.
Yeah.
I
Before
don't
Call
use
of
that.
Duty
I don't
existed.
use that word ever.
Yeah, before Call of Duty existed, and Quake was in there as well as Unreal Tournament, the early ones. But for console gamers, this game was awesome, right? You could get in a room with your friends on your N64, get 4 controllers. That last guy who picked the bad controller that the joystick didn't go all the way to the left, he was just kind of fucked. But GoldenEye, 007, it is the game that I don't want to say set the standard for shooters, but it really felt that way, right?
So here's the thing. When he's talking about GoldenEye, right? For those of you who are watching this that might be younger or maybe just never experienced it, when we say that the N64 had where you plugged up 4 controllers, you just had 4 screens on your TV. And granted, I know for me growing up, I didn't have a 65-inch TV, right? You had a smaller TVs, maybe 40-inch if you're lucky, whatever. But you had 4 screens broken up, and you had to worry about screen watching and stuff. But that was when GoldenEye was one of those original games when you had parties of friends. You had your all your best friends.
It was
came
game
over.
night.
Yeah,
you
game
came
night.
over. You were in person.
You're smart. You brought your own special controller, because the other thing too was you could do it with PlayStation controllers stuff now too, but it was really big with N64 kind of, and then it kind of went from there. You had your own customized controller that you designed, made it look cooler. So if you were smart, you didn't come to game night and use your buddies, because he's going to give you the shit one, right?
You will get the shit one. If you didn't bring your controller, you were getting the one that the B button didn't work.
I made some of them. You spill something in them to make the button sticky. So whenever like, oh hey, you don't have a controller, use this one. You're gonna be fucked. Plus, you had screen watchers, and I'd look up and see. I know where he's at. Run to it and go and kill him. It was the game that, as much as it probably brought friends together, it also tore them apart. Now the great thing with this game was you could play the story mode, and the story mode went exactly to the movie.
It was from the movie.
Yeah, it was 100% the movie.
One of the things about
you start in the air ducts in the bathroom and you drop down. That's like the first scene of the movie.
Yeah, of all the games we've talked about so far, I feel like this game was taken, like they literally watched the screenplay. They took what was in the movie and put it in the game. Like, I don't know if we've talked about a game so far in this video that has done it as well as GoldenEye 007. Like it felt like you were playing the movie. I mean, you're playing the damn movie. Yeah, you're playing the damn movie.
The other one that I would say did this almost as well, and ironically, it's another James Bond game, was James Bond: The World Is Not Enough. That game, if you played the story mode, followed to the letter what the ski mission, and you had where you're on the boat and all that stuff, followed almost to the letter of the storyline. But then it had the online, or I say online, it had the multiplayer component, but it didn't have the feel that GoldenEye did. Especially built that fucker who took Odd Job. He's only half the size of everybody else.
Yeah, we had one rule, or I guess 2 rules. You can't pick Jaws and you can't pick Odd Job, just because it's not fair. Because if you were Odd Job and you had someone as Jaws, they couldn't see you. Literally, the screen, you couldn't see the character. It would just run around your feet, right? It was a game, you mentioned it, it could make you could have a great night, or it could be you wanted to fucking kill them after the night was over, right? It was such a great game, whether you're playing multiplayer with your friends or whether you're just playing the single player through. I've replayed that game so many times. There's a remastered version you can get. I say remastered; it's just a newer version of the game. It's reskinned, I guess. The graphics look a little bit better. They're still blocky. The textures look better, I guess I should say. But it's such an iconic game. It's one of those games for the N64 that put it on the map. I don't know how many copies of that game were sold, but I would say it's up there, right? It has to be.
Most would venture to say it's the only really successful game to come out of the N64, right? Yeah, your Mario and stuff like that, blah blah blah. Okay, so what? But but GoldenEye is probably the one saving grace of the N64. Now, here's the thing, and I'm talking about original Halo, where now we're moving into technology where you had LAN parties, right? But you may actually have your buddy in the room, but now you're on separate screens. Like you had two
Mhm.
TVs in the one room and you were connected, but you still couldn't do it online. Where like if Mantis is
Yeah. It was a
there and
LAN.
I'm here in the studio, yeah, Um, but that Halo, the original Halo, and that's why I used the original Halo with that. And GoldenEye from N64 are probably GoldenEye. I say is better, but they're probably two of the only games. And I'm not going to get off on the Halo aspect, so let's focus on the GoldenEye aspect. Is that
Mhm.
a lot of games now, like you play Call of Duty, the storyline's kind of shit. I think the newest one doesn't even have one, right? It just play the online
Mhm.
multiplayer, or they have a great story, but the multiplayer's garbage or whatever. GoldenEye was, sticking with this topic of it. It was the one game that I loved the single player story mode as much as the online or the multiplayer playing with friends. And other
Right.
than, like I said, if we
Well,
want to throw Halo in there, I can't think of another game that really blended where you loved both, right? The original Halo
yeah.
story, and then being able to LAN party with your friends and battle, in Halo kind of tournaments. But
Yeah.
sticking with the movies to games, GoldenEye did it amazing.
Yeah, and I think the thing was for me a couple of points. So first off, I kind of found this. So the game sold over 8 million copies, making it the third best selling Nintendo 64 game ever. Secondly, I think the thing that lends GoldenEye to being as great as it was because the movie was so good, right? Like
It was
it's
good.
one of my favorite James Bond flicks of all time. I didn't grow up when
Sean Connery and them.
yeah, Sean Connery or Roger Moore or Timothy Dalton. Like I didn't grow up in that area. I've seen those movies, don't get me wrong. But whenever I started watching James Bond, it was Pierce Brosnan. That's who it was, right? To me, he was my Bond, right?
And he's mine.
So
I'm not saying Sean Connery didn't
yeah.
do an amazing job, but
No.
he's my Bond. He's
Yeah.
what I grew up with.
Yeah. He was James Bond when I started watching the movies. And that movie was so good. It was awesome. It was a great movie. So when you make a game that literally lets you play the movie that you love, and the game is great, and it has multiplayer, which games at the time again didn't have that option. There was not a first person shooter multiplayer game on Nintendo 64 or any game system realistically at the time. So that's what you got. And you got both of those in one package. So there's no, I mean, I could definitely see why it was the third highest selling Nintendo 64 game. And even today, I mean, it's, I could still go through that single player game. It's more of a casual, laid back thing, like because the frames per second are probably what, like around 12 or something like that. Like it's not great. Like they move in slow motion, right? It's pretty easy to aim in the game. So
So, like how they did Final Fantasy VII, the remake, right? Where they basically kept with the exact story. Now, granted, they added a lot of very good stuff. Go play that game if you haven't. But they added a lot of great stuff. But really, they vastly improved the graphics to just a beautiful standard. Its cutscenes look like a movie. The gameplay itself looks amazing, looks beautiful. If they would do that same thing with GoldenEye, oh my god! Especially the guys
yeah,
like us at our age, we'd be back to accept and just make it online where we said, oh, like that's all it would
yeah,
be. Okay, who cares about Destiny anymore? It's like we're just gonna fucking play
right.
GoldenEye. Still
Yeah,
no
yeah.
hot job.
Still don't jump. It's one of those games that you can't ignore. It's a staple for consoles at the time. For first person shooters for any like just saying video games in general. It was a great game. It happens to be based off of a movie, which is again another hurdle I think. Which, like I said, I think what lends it to being so successful in that aspect is because the movie is so good. You know.
So now let me ask you this question here, kind of wrapping things up. Would you consider GoldenEye the best game from a movie of everything? Not even just of the ones we talked about. I'm sure there's ones we haven't. Would you consider it the best game adaptation from a movie?
I don't know. I mean, it's definitely in the top 5 for me. I don't know if it's the best, but it's definitely in the top 5.
Only reason I would be almost willing to give it that title is because when it came out, that was my world. Like, that's all I played was GoldenEye, 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 GoldenEye.
Sure.
I can say honestly, of all the other video games from movies, I have not played another one as much as I played that one. And you got to think that's what, we're not talking about graphics. We're not talking about everything else. We're talking about how many hours you put into it. Now, like with Destiny, Mantis and I can go on a website and check our counters and realize how much of our lives we've been playing Destiny 1 and 2.
I won't talk about it.
If I did GoldenEye, you could see how much of my childhood, or I'd say childhood, my adolescence into well, I guess it's still adolescence, that I wasted playing GoldenEye. So of all of the movies or games that came from movies, it is the one that I have played the most. I can tell you that for sure.
I would say it's up there for me. Like I said, that's why I'd put it in the top 5. I mean, I played a lot of the Star Wars games, like a whole lot on NES or SNES. I mean, I don't know. It's definitely up there of Nintendo 64 games specifically. It's definitely up there. Like, I don't know, we're getting off into where games are not movies here, or the game's not made for movies, but Ocarina of Time, I played that game so many times through, not so much Majora's Mask, but Ocarina of Time I did.
That doesn't count.
I know. I'm just saying, like,
to our games to movies, because they're, we if you watch that games to movies video, they talked about, they announced they are going to make a live action Legend of Zelda. So maybe you'll get that wish. Or they'll make a Zelda movie and then they'll make a game from that movie. And let's see if it lives. So now there's an interesting, and guys, we're going to wrap it up here soon, I promise. But there's an interesting idea is you already have a well-established video game series, right? And now you make a movie from it. So the games to movies, like the last video. What happens if when you make that movie, then you make a game from that movie that came from a game?
I know, from a game, yeah. Well, it kind of gets into the weird territory again, because I want to bring this up too. Before we had home consoles, there were arcades, and one of the funnest games that I remember playing down at the mall was T2. You got the which you can buy. I will say this: look on OneUpArcade.com. You can buy it for your house, but it is. I know you know what I'm talking about. If you're watching this, there's 2 guns. There's a red gun and a blue gun. And you got the screen and you're shooting. It's like House of the Dead type thing, but it's Terminator. It's T2. So that strictly arcade games. That was a great game too, made from a movie.
That is, and that's the only problem is for a while there you didn't have access to those games, even though some of them are from movies. And part of that added just because you were out around friends and other kids and such, so it added to the experience. However, real quick, not going to go off on a long tangent here, but like Best Buy, like he just mentioned them, a lot of them actually have arcade consoles now you can buy. Like they have a Ninja Turtles one that actually has all of the old arcade Ninja Turtles games in it. So it has all of them. They have a Mortal Kombat one that has, which I want the Mortal Kombat one so bad, but they have multiple of the Mortal Kombats in the arcade where the cabinet where you have to hit the little buttons.
Yep.
So you can kind of bring that feel back to it. That's it. I'm done. No more tangent on that.
Yeah. One up game. I think it's One Up. What's what I want to call it there. One Up game.
2 girls, 1 up. No.
You can find them, maybe Arcade 1-Up, I think maybe is what it's called. You can find them. You can find the smaller versions of them at like Walmart. They'll have them in the electronics section, especially
they have a tabletop version of them a lot of times.
Yeah. It's this time of year. You can find them in there for kind of discounted because it's during the holidays. So you'll find them on sale and stuff. But if you're interested in those type of things, they're a great time. They're great, especially. I don't know if you can get them at Walmart, but the virtual pinball ones are good too. So, but in any way, yeah, we're going.
Well, and actually, kind of interesting. It brings us to today's sponsor, which is Nintendo. No, I'm just joking. But you can get a lot of. We don't have any sponsors, but you can get a lot of those games we've been talking about on the Switch now. Like we just said, you can actually get the pod racing game from Star Wars. You could get the Jedi Academy, all those Star Wars games that Mantis was mentioning. You can get a lot of those on Switch.
Dark Forces. I like that game. I like
so-
Dark Forces.
All right, so ending thought here, real quick. We're gonna wrap it up and get your thought on this. So, what would you say has been more successful, bringing movies,
Yes.
taking movies and bringing them to games, or taking games and bringing them to movies?
Yeah. Movies to games.
Movies
for
to
sure.
games. You think
Yeah,
that's
I
been
would
more
say.
successful?
I think so. I think because a good movie, again, because I'm talking about Goldeneye, like it just enhances the game so much better. Like you already have that character in mind, right? I don't know if it's maybe writers in the Hollywood don't particularly care to look up the lore like how they do with comic book movies. Like they don't particularly like to understand the lore, like Resident Evil. We did when we did with our games to movies. They don't particularly like to look up the lore for these games, and it's out there, but they just don't care, or they don't. They're not interested in it, right?
They want to try to
So-
reinvent the wheel. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
we come up
With
something
with
better.
movies to games, there's leeway in there. I think maybe gamers give a little bit more leeway to developers of video games to say, okay, we understand you can't make it exactly like the movie. That's fine. But when you do, it's like, holy shit, this is awesome, right? Like this is just like the movie. This is awesome, right? It just you get above that threshold where it just makes it awesome. So
Here's the thing, and this is my final thought on this, because again, I think I'm kind of jilted from like the Iron Man and Thor games and stuff like that were terrible.
we didn't talk about Superman.
Dude, we haven't. Yeah, we're not even going to go into
Yeah.
that room. Is that you think of games like Starfield, Skyrim, GTA 5? Those games take years and years to develop. GTA 5 has the largest budget of any video game at the time. I think Star Citizen is going to surpass it.
Yeah,
But-
that's a little different, but yeah,
by twice.
I-
But GTA 5 had the budget, actually it cost enough that is basically a big budget. It was $260 million, right? Took years to make GTA 5. Versus Iron Man, the game probably took 6 months. They probably,
Yeah.
the movie's going to release here soon. Let's crank out a video game because, again, merchandising.
Merchandising, where the real money from the movie is made.
So,
Yeah.
there's-
Sorry, it's funny. Like this is not about this movie or about this video, but like, how come we haven't seen like a Grand Theft Auto movie? Like, it's just interesting.
I like, and I'm going to cut it in here, the Family Guy, when Peter has amnesia or whatever, and Lois has to teach him how to drive. She goes, "Here, play Grand Theft Auto," for like 8 hours. And it's
Yeah.
like 8 hours later, he like carjacks somebody and he beats him up, and then he like kills this or beats up this hooker and stuff and steals her money. And, like, he's playing Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah.
I think they did put out a Grand Theft Auto. It was called Gone in 60 Seconds.
Yeah. Not quite the same vibe. There's no racial slurs being thrown around in that movie like there is in Grand Theft Auto.
Right.
Just saying.
I don't know that one could necessarily. Maybe if they did it like a Ready Player One, like where you go
Yeah.
into the Grand Theft Auto world.
True.
That would actually
Yeah.
be interesting. So, guys, if you've made it with us this far, we definitely appreciate you staying here. I apologize, this one ran a little over, but as I say in almost every video, we could talk about this subject for hours. If you have, though, we appreciate it. Definitely consider giving this video a like, subscribing to the channel for more of this content, and then let us know down in the comments what was a game that came from a movie that you love. Maybe you played Goldeneye.
Yeah.
Maybe that's your number one. Let us know what your favorite was, because I'd be interested.
If it's not, which one did we overlook? Like, I'm sure there's tons that we didn't talk about because there's so many games, but let us know of a particular game that we should check out that was from a movie that we just didn't mention.
Absolutely. And Mantis, unless you have anything else.
No.
All right, guys. Well, we appreciate it, and we will see you next time.
Later.